This evening, I am happy to introduce Jonathan Sun to all of you. He is more popularly known by his Twitter handle Jonny Sun. He is one of Time Magazine's 25 most influential people on the internet for 2017. His work has appeared on Time Magazine, BuzzFeed, GQ, McSweeney's, and many more. Today, he's going to talk about his new book, Everyone's an Alien When You're an Aliebn Too. It is based on his very popular and joyful Twitter account, proof that Twitter can still bring joy to this world. Yes, it is the illustrated story of a lonely alien sent to observe Earth, only to meet all sorts of creatures with all sorts of perspectives on life, love, and happiness, all while learning to feel a little better about being an alien. Lin-Manuel Miranda, you may not know him. He is an obscure playwright, composer, and lyricist. But he has said that Jonny Sun's incredible writing knocks you to the floor, breathless, then scoops you up and gives you a kiss, where it hurts before it occurs to you to cry. Read this book, only if you want to feel more alive. And Patton Oswalt said that Jonny Sun has created a frightened, hopeful view of life as we know it, from the perspective of a weirdly relatable alien intelligence. Fantastic. Tonight, Jonny will be in conversation with Linda Holmes, writer and editor for NPR's entertainment blog Monkey See, and co-host of the inimitable Pop Culture at Happy Hour podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, Jonny Sun and Linda Holmes.
Hello.
Why, hello.
We're not like behind anything. It's very close. It's cool.
What you're seeing now is me trying to get situated without dress moving around too much. Wow, so we know each other from Twitter.
Hello,
I know
Twitter.
so many
Hello,
people.
everyone. Yeah.
But this is the first time we've actually met, so I have to ask you all my actual normal
Cool. This is great.
questions. What do you do at MIT? I've always wanted to ask you.
I'm like a student, a sort of part-time student, as I do all this stuff too. But I'm researching. I'm at the Department of Urban Studies and Planning, and I'm researching like social media communities. And I'm kind of looking at.
Oh.
I'm
I
looking
feel
at,
like you would have a
theory.
natural advantage being one of the 25 most influential people.
I hope so. I'm trying. I'm trying to convince my professors that like studying the internet is a worthwhile thing to do.
Right.
Because they're mainly architects and like urban planners.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So this book,
Mm-hmm.
which I like so much, how long has this little guy been in your life?
That little guy, the Twitter account has been in my life for like 6 years now, I think. And I sort of made my avatar an alien almost just like instinctively when I started, because I found this weird culture called weird Twitter with a lot of quotes. And everyone there was an anonymous account, right? They were like things like Famous Crab or Drill, who is a picture of Jack Nicholson in sunglasses. And it took me a while to realize it wasn't actually Jack Nicholson. But I felt like I had to create a thing too. And so I just like went on Illustrator and I drew like a little smiley face and put it over a picture of myself. And that was sort of the genesis of like, oh, okay, I'll tweet sort of as an alien, but also just as myself. But then like this actual character of the alien in the book was probably like 2 or 3 years old. I just started drawing, sketching like the little character, and I wanted to do a webcomic at first. And I realized I didn't have time for that because I was in architecture school, and Twitter was like the only amount of time that I had, which was maybe 5 or 10 minutes in between classes and like on the walk home, and it was cool because I could just do it whenever, whereas a webcomic was more structured. It was like a few times a week. And I didn't have time to do that. So I just had those sketches around, and I just kept thinking about that until sort of the opportunity to do a book came along.
You also have a background in comedy, yes?
Yes,
You did what kind of stuff?
I did a lot of sketch. I did a lot of sketch with like my student group in university and for undergrad. I did some improv. I kind of took some classes at Second City in Toronto, and that was sort of my intro into the comedy kind of mindset or sphere. So yeah.
Did you have an like what were your original aspirations like when you were younger? 'Cause you're still very young.
Sure.
Younger. What aspirations did you originally have? Because I doubt it was weird Twitter.
Correct. I mean, I guess in terms of comedy, I've always loved. Like, I grew up in the age where, as a teenager, I didn't really watch TV for comedy. I watched I went on YouTube and I watched sketches and I watched like Derek Comedy, which was Donald Glover's kind of sketch group that spun off into like everyone there spun off into all these different things. So for a while, I wanted to do like online sketch comedy. Like I wanted to sort of be a YouTube sketch person.
You could have done that.
I guess so, yeah. But I realized like I don't feel good on screen or in front of people really. So hello, all of you. But yeah.
Yeah. And so when the opportunity to do this book came around, had you been shaping this story over the course of kind of developing your voice on Twitter? Was it a completely new story?
It was sort of a little bit of both. And I thought, like, I always think of Twitter as sort of like a writer's notebook in a way, or just like a sketchbook or a diary or some amalgamation of all those things where you kind of import like some version of yourself online and you kind of create an identity that is in your own voice and that you kind of like add to on the go and you kind of keep doing that. So for a while, I just treated Twitter as like this place where I could tweet thoughts and jokes and talk about my anxieties and fears and dreams and stuff. And over time, I started looking back on that and realized that I had a lot of different threads that I kept revisiting and different types of things I wanted to talk about and different types of humor and types of jokes. And as I was thinking about doing a book, I started going back to the Twitter account and I found like, oh, I talk about like imposter syndrome a lot. Or I talk about like this anxiety of not knowing what I should become a lot. And those sort of became these little groupings that became different characters in the book. So it was sort of like a bit of both where I went back and sort of like dramaturged myself into figuring out these different characters and this kind of story.
Yeah, the owls, at least the one owl, has imposter syndrome.
Yes.
I recognize that one, as I suspect many of us did. It's particularly funny, of course, that the wisdom of the owl is to doubt that he's wise and therefore a real owl, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So when you're matching up, I mean, that one seems to have a particular, match between animal and quality.
Right.
Do they all have a similar match between animal and quality to you, or are some of them just, I need somebody to feel this way, so I'm going to have it be the bear or the whoever?
Right. Part of the fun was in figuring out which characters match up to which things. The owl, like you said, is like, I wanted to comment on like that traditional symbol of knowledge, right? And flip that. Partially because I just got to MIT, I just started my doctoral program, and I realized I was surrounded by all these people who like I thought were totally brilliant, and then the more I talked to them, they all thought that like they didn't belong. And I didn't feel like I belonged there. And so we all together had this burden of like the MIT and being a PhD student, and we're all sort of dealing with that imposter syndrome by ourselves. And so that's what the owls sort of became. Obviously, like, the egg matches really well with not knowing what you're supposed to be, and like the idea of like potential and hatching and becoming something. And then some of them sort of just didn't have as like close of a one-to-one sort of symbolism. Like the hedgehog, for me, I don't know. I just like hedgehog like videos. I like the cute little viral hedgehog videos. Yeah, exactly. And I thought that would be like a very sweet kind of thing. Yeah.
Did you have a favorite one to actually draw in different, I don't know, poses?
Yeah. Well, the egg is actually like the hardest one to draw because eggs are really I remember taking like a life drawing class when I was in high school where we drew eggs for a semester because it was just so hard to do them, and we did them in all these sorts of different like mediums. We did like watercolor eggs and like line drawing eggs and charcoal eggs, and you learn to appreciate like how hard it is to get right or how easy it is to get wrong. So for the egg, I wanted to like make sure it stayed an egg but also was a little bit flexible, sort of like a hard-boiled egg. It had a little bit of like
A little bit of
bounciness.
spring to it.
Yeah. And so when the egg like rolls over and stuff, you feel the weight of it. It's not just like a sideways like a sideways egg.
Sure.
Yeah.
It has the give of a nice hard-boiled egg.
Yeah.
So one of the things that occurred to me as I was going back through this book was what editing this book would be like. Because I know how regular editing works.
Right.
I don't know if I know how editing a book like this would work. Talking, either just you in your own mind thinking, this needs to be a little bigger, this needs to be a little smaller, I'm going to have more words here, fewer words here. What is perfecting a book like this that seems so spontaneous? Like, it seems like spontaneous creation, and you're trying to kind of make it continue to feel kind of spontaneous and very light. What is that process of perfecting it like?
I had a really like me and my editor got really close because we talked about this a lot. The sort of first draft of it was a script. It was written like a screenplay, basically. And there's just all the words and all the scenes described. And that was a good way to sort of get a feel of the rhythm of it. And like the idea that I wanted, like the sort of formal idea and the narrative idea for the book was sort of to take the Twitter timeline, or take like this idea of what a timeline is, and translate that to a narrative structure. Whereas like if a sort of old traditional children's book would be split up into chapters for each character, for example, this book would be different. You'd take all the characters and you'd get little updates from them as you went along. And so the metaphor of the book sort of was like someone who joined this like platform, I guess, and followed a bunch of creatures, and you get all their updates like that. So that was sort of like the narrative structure of this. I keep trying to like indicate to the book, and I don't know where it is. The narrative structure of that. And so we tried to make that, and I'm glad you said it feels kind of spontaneous and immediate, because we tried to do that. That was one of the things we tried to do, and we kept switching back and forth different characters and where those sort of updates would appear. We cut a few characters. There was a sloth character that was supposed to show up. I know. And maybe that'll be like a small zine one day.
Deleted scene.
Yeah, but like the reason the sloth got cut was because each joke took like 6 pages to tell. And that was the joke of it, but we were like, eventually my editor was like, we can't give 40 pages of this book to the sloth.
To the joke of how slow the sloth is.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting I'm looking at this, in this spread here, the alien is pulling the sheet off a ghost, right?
Yeah.
I'm describing that accurately.
Yes.
And so over here you have the sheet halfway being pulled off. And over here you have the alien with the sheet down here, but looking at nothing. Is there ever a point when you're doing a book like this and you look at how much white space it has and how simple these drawings are, and you think, are people going to stay with this book when it is simple? The art is, you have a pretty, you have a lot of uniformity of the lines and all of that stuff, as opposed to a lot of very fussy, look what I did here.
Sure.
Were you confident that people would stay with this book?
I was hopeful, mainly because like I think this sort of was a representation of like the stuff that I am interested in visually, and I've sort of, for the book, like, part of the thesis was to sort of reduce and to minimize and like part of my, like, when I was in architecture school, I decided I was probably a minimalist, and so like it was sort of to reduce every image and every idea into as short of a form as possible through words, and then as simple as an illustration as possible. So they almost became icons.
Yeah, this one too.
Yeah.
It's like that, this guy.
Yeah, and even like figuring out if I needed to put a line there or if I didn't to indicate ground. All that stuff became, for me it became very fussy to like make the decision of like how much to add and how much context not to have and everything.
Right. Well, that's sort of what I'm asking, is I think this kind of stuff takes just as much fussing. It's just it's not as obvious what it would look like, what that process would look like to somebody who hasn't done it.
Totally, yeah. It was, a lot of it was like drawing everything and then realizing, I can take the ground line away. I can give more white space. I don't have to draw clouds in every page. and yeah, it was kind of like this idea of taking away, and then like you're getting to the point in the book where we're just reading this book to ourselves. you get to the point of the book where you get to that page, and that's sort of like all the simplicity sort of leads up to this very. Oh yes, yeah, me too. It leads up to this very like maximalist kind of page, and I think in order to get the effect of that, you really had to make everything simple leading up to it. So.
You like to draw bees.
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
Yes.
I like the bees.
I do too.
And between the bees and the beavers and things like that, you also have a lot of. I'm delighted by the number of cheap puns in the book.
Yes.
Cheap jokes in the book. It made me so happy.
Thank you.
Do you have a soft spot for like puns and dad jokes and stuff like that? No offense, Dad.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think they're delightful, and I think like I was really interested in how they operate, sort of in partnership with talking about more serious stuff, and sort of the idea of like this very like one-dimensional, like fun, immediate humor balanced with all this other stuff. And like, I don't think it was a coincidence that I was watching a lot of BoJack Horseman when I was writing the book. Which becomes like I think that becomes like a really great thesis of balancing like the super silly with like the super sort of like intense. And so that was one of those inspirations. And so I thought it'd be nice to like lighten and then darken and lighten and darken and create that balance.
Yeah. You know, I wanted to ask you a little bit about the work that you do on Twitter day to day. And I was trying to figure out the way to ask it. And then I realized that I came to this event dressed as your Twitter persona.
Okay. Oh yeah.
Sparkly. It's a little over the top. It's a little
wonderful.
sparkly. You came as your normal self.
I can just do my whole event
You came
like
as
this.
you, and I came as your Twitter feed.
Wonderful.
So somebody at the office the other day was telling me, oh, I saw that you were doing this event, and I think I haven't even read the book yet, but I think he's so interesting on Twitter. And we talked about the fact that you're sort of a professional public empath.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Kind of talking about feelings in a very positive and compassionate way that's extremely earnest. And therefore, I'm sure, not for everyone.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Because
absolutely.
occasionally I see people try to sort of push back against that tone, and it just seems so pointless to me. Did you sit down at some point and think, I'm going to be a cheering up kind of person? Because it's a little different from what weird Twitter is.
Right. Yeah. Well, because it's spun off,
it's a
right?
spin-off of it, right? It's cheer up Twitter, kind of.
Sort of. Yeah.
Do you? I mean, maybe you're the king of it.
I don't know. I feel weird about being the king of anything.
You and Josh Gondelman, right?
Sure.
Cheer up Twitter.
Right. And Darth.
Yes, absolutely. Did you make a conscious decision at some point about the way that you wanted to interact with people, even if it wasn't necessarily about your work?
Sure.
What you wanted the tone of following you to be like?
Yeah, I think I did sort of in like a conscious and subconscious way. I think like Twitter's been really interesting because it is on one hand like this place where I can kind of put stuff out and have people react to it immediately and interact with people and create conversations and get to see the feedback right away. And then on the other hand, it's also a place where, and I think everyone who's on Twitter is sort of on Twitter, like even though it doesn't really make sense to be. And there's something that I find like really compelling of just having a place where I get to be myself, or I get to be part of myself, or I get to construct myself in some way that I want.
Yeah.
And so I think that like that idea of kind of talking about my feelings and trying to be positive and hopeful is both something that I think people I've been able to have like really constructive conversations with people about because of that, and I think it's something that I also need. I think it's something that it's a place where I need to do that, and I need to put that out there just for myself. Yeah. But I also I would also push back about being sort of cheer up Twitter, because I think I tweet a lot about like anxiety and depression.
No, that's true.
You know?
You do. I think it's more that on the whole, I guess more have hope than cheer. If I would put it that way and say it more fairly.
Absolutely. And I think that part was also conscious because I know there's a lot of sort of like optimism that like I think is kind of like bland optimism
Sure.
or like it's optimism that doesn't work. It's stuff that says like don't worry about it or just like push it aside and just be happy and like smile more. And I think that stuff always doesn't. It always rubs me the wrong way. And I think part of what I wanted to do was find a way for me to be able to talk about optimism and hope without being sort of that like falsely positive thing. To acknowledge that like we're going through stuff and I'm going through stuff and there is bad stuff in the world and sort of go from there.
Well, it felt like one of the things that I've wondered when I've seen you talking about kind of hope and telling people how you feel is okay and that kind of stuff, whether it would feel, because you talk about depression and anxiety and things like that, whether it would feel like pressure to maintain that outlook. But it sounds like what you're saying is that it's good for you to kind of have a reason to adopt that outlook and share it with other people. Is that fair?
Absolutely. I think a lot of it is aspirational. And I think a lot of it is me like having this need to create something outside of myself that and then I can reference and hold on to as sort of like a landmark or a tent pole. And that like if I'm able to put words to something, then I'm able to sort of hold myself accountable to those words more. Yeah.
One of the things that I love about this book is that I have no idea what your next thing would look like.
Great.
And it feels like it could be anything. You could tell me, oh, it's a sci-fi novel, and I would say sugar. And you could say it's a literary novel, and I'd say sugar, of course, or another book similar to this. Do you have a manageable set of aspirations? Given that you've done comedy writing, M.I.T, drawing, obviously. Is it a manageable set of aspirations?
No, it's a very unhealthy.
Good.
I think it's a very sort of unhealthy drive to do stuff.
It's unhealthy. It's just.
My girlfriend's behind you, just giving me the nod. I mean, but I there's just so much stuff to do. I feel like I think a lot of like the people I look up to are people who do a bunch of stuff, and I think like I don't think it's worth sort of like boxing people into one form of thing anymore. And I think I hope slowly that we're becoming more accustomed to creative people and artists and people being able to branch out. So I'm trying to do that and I'm trying to see where that leads, I guess.
The book's going to be a musical, though, right?
It's going to be a concept rap album.
I mean, I was just going to say you have the right friend. It would be a lovely musical. I would go. So do you want to do some reading from the book?
Sure, yeah. That sounds great, yeah. Let's do this reading. Should we turn on this projector somehow? All right. I do like to do these as a read-along, so if anyone has a copy of the book with them, my favorite thing is to get everyone to read along. So turn to the first page, the one with all the UFOs. I can give you that. Okay, cool. And I'm going to read over your shoulder as we do this. Okay, so we're starting on this page with the 4 UFOs. All right. Vroom. Wobble, wobble. Screech. Thump. The spaceship lands, carrying the night sky with it. Please find out about the Earth creatures, says the first alien. Humans, says the second alien, pointing to a bird. Yes, humans, says the third alien, pointing to a tuft of grass. Take your time, really. Take as much time as you need, says the fourth alien. So, you're leaving me here all alone? Jomny asks. Well, we'll check in on you in case you mess anything up, says the fifth alien. Okay, says Jomny. Can we go already, says the sixth alien, already bored of this planet. And so off they go, carrying the night sky with it as they leave. Everyone's an alien when you're an alien too. Jomny sees a tree. Hello, are you an Earth creature? Jomny asks. Yes, says the tree. I have met a human, says Jomny happily. Jomny comes across a snail and shouts, tell me about yourself, to the snail. The snail responds, oh, gee, well, nobody's ever asked me about myself. I guess everybody tells me I'm too small and too slow to make a difference in this world, but I'm making a difference in my own world, and I hope that's enough. Jomny then comes across a bear. Jomny starts poking the bear because he doesn't know what a bear is and says, wow, you're very big. Are you going to run screaming from me then, asks the bear. No, says Jomny. Oh, thank you, says the bear. Meanwhile, the turtle and all the other animals are running away, and the turtle shouts, run! Run as fast as you can! Faster! Save yourselves! Leave me behind and save yourselves! Run! R-U-N! Run! Says one particular bee. Jomny comes across a dog. Jomny comes across a dog, and the dog says a word that can roughly be translated to the symbol of a heart. Oh, I'm sorry, I do not understand that word, but okay, says Jomny. Jomny comes across an egg. Hello, what are you? Jomny asks the egg. I don't know yet, says the egg. Okay, says Jomny. Isn't that exciting, says the egg, shaking with excitement. Jomny then comes across a hedgehog. Who are you? Jomny asks. Oh, I'm an introvert, which is different from an extrovert, says the hedgehog. What's that? Asks Jomny. Well, introverts enjoy people watching. Extroverts enjoy people watching. Which is a grammar joke. It's a hyphen joke. Okay, says Jomny, looking at a flower who he decides must be an extrovert. Oh yeah, bees, you like this, says the flower? You like what I got? You like what you see? Because there's plenty of me to go around. To which one particular bee responds, hi, H-I, hi. Jomny comes across a pond. Swim, splash. You swim very nicely, Jomny says. Of course, I'm an auteur, says the otter. Hello, otter, says Jomny. Swim, swim, swim. No, wait, I'm an auteur, clarifies the otter. Jomny comes across a smaller pond and asks, hello, who are you, to all the smaller pond creatures. It's not about who we are, it's about what we will become, says the caterpillar. That is the gift of being a baby, says the tadpole. Isn't it exciting, shouts the egg again, shaking with excitement. Jomny thinks about this idea of a gift. What is a gift? Can I have a gift? Jomny asks the tree. Oh, I actually learned to stop giving things to somebody just because they want something, the tree says. I don't think that would end well for me. What if I give you a hug? Jomny asks, giving the tree a hug. Oh, I love hugs, but really, you don't have to give me anything to be my friend. What's a friend? Asks Jomny. A friend is anyone or anything who shares a life with you that you would never be able to experience without them, says the tree. Jomny walks up to a bird. Hello, friend. You used to be a dinosaur. Jomny walks up to a skeleton. Hello, friend. You used to be a baby. The tree pulls Jomny aside and says, maybe stay away from that, friend. Okay, says Jomny. Jomny comes up to an onion, and the onion says, I'm like an onion. Peel back the layers, and you'll see that deep down inside, I'm just a smaller, more afraid onion. But you are an onion, says Jomny. Yes, I know that, but also, now I want to cry, says the onion, feeling misunderstood. Jomny walks up to an owl and asks, hello, friend, who are you? The owl responds, Who am I? I don't really know. Everybody calls me wise, and I've tried to learn very much about the world. But I don't feel very wise, and I know that owls are supposed to be wise, so then I don't feel owl enough to be an owl. I feel like one day I'll meet another owl, and they'll take one look at me and say, oh, somebody made a mistake. You're not supposed to be an owl at all. Anyway, who are you? Asks the owl. I'm Jomny, says Jomny. Oh, lucky, says the owl. Jomny sees the bees again and asks, will you be my friends? To which one particular bee responds, I'm sorry, we can't. I'm afraid we'll accidentally sting you. Jomny sees a beaver and shouts, wait, hello, friend. To which the beaver responds, I'm sorry, I have to work, and I don't have time to be your friend. I'm sorry, can't you see I'm in a hurry here? The beaver says in a very Canadian way. Oh, don't bother with that damn beaver, says the tree. But I need to work. Please stay out of my damn business, says the beaver. Then please stop stealing my branches, shouts the tree. They're not yours, shouts the beaver. Yes, they are, shouts the tree. I'm sorry, but they're my damn branches now, shouts the beaver. Those are my arms, shouts the tree. What if I never hatch, shouts the egg. Or what if I do hatch and it's the best moment of my life, but then I never get to hatch again? What if I want to hatch but also never hatch? Can I do both or neither? Why are you so worried? You're an egg, says Jomny. That's not fair, says the egg. You already know who you are. But you're an egg, says Jomny, trying to help. The egg rolls over on its side. You just don't get it, says the egg. Oh, says Jomny. Jomny sees the dog again, and the dog says another word that can also be roughly translated to the symbol of a heart. I still don't know what that means, but I know that I'm happy now, says Jomny. Meanwhile, the spaceship lands, carrying the night sky with it. I like the humans, says Jomny. They're all so different, and I wish I could be more like them. You're not supposed to like them, says the first alien. You're supposed to research them, says the second alien. I do not like them, says the third alien. He should be more like us, says the fourth alien, agreeing with the third alien. He's already too weird, says the fifth alien. Yeah, says the sixth alien, agreeing with the fifth alien. The humans are weird, says the seventh alien. Yeah, says the eighth alien, agreeing with the seventh alien. And so off they go, this time leaving Jomny and the night sky alone. And that's where we'll stop the reading. Thank you, everyone. Yay. Yay.
All right, so we have a Q&A mic over there and a Q&A mic over there. And if you have a question about aliens or M.I.T. or the YouTube sketch comedy
Yeah.
of Donald Glover's early career,
Yeah.
please step up and ask a question. Can't wait. Oh, we have one now.
Yay.
Coming to the thing.
Hi.
Hello.
My question is just, what were did you have any fiction inspirations when you were writing this book? Because to me, I think the thing I thought of when I was reading was Little Prince, and I was just kind of wondering what were the inspirations that went into making it.
Totally, yeah. Thank you. I actually never read Little Prince, and I still haven't. And when people started talking about Little Prince, I made a note not to read it because I didn't want it to influence this story. But I mean, a lot of the book has been about. I've sort of been thinking about it as like a kid's book that's been updated, and that's a bit longer, and that's sort of that carries through that feeling and that tone now that we've grown up a bit. And so like my sort of references for this were Shel Silverstein and Calvin and Hobbes, and Harold and the Purple Crayon, and like Morris Sendak books like Where the Wild Things Are, and all these ideas of sort of these outsiders and how they deal with the world around them. So yeah. Yes.
Hi. First off, I just would like to say thank you. Thank you for this book. Thank you for your Twitter.
Thank you.
And specifically, thank you for my senior quote.
Oh yeah.
I chose your tweet that says, "The fog never clears, but we still brave ahead. Our greatest reward is that sometimes we get to meet other explorers." So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you.
And my question is, I follow you on Instagram, so I see that you post like a lot of music suggestions on your story. So I was wondering, what music have you been listening to a lot recently? Like, what are your suggestions?
Yeah, music I've been listening to a lot recently. I really like the new Janelle Monáe singles. And I can't wait for the album to come out. I've been really into that. I've also been into Chance the Rapper's Christmas album, which has been weird because, normally I don't like Christmas, and I think it makes me makes me feel sad, and it kind of overwhelms me. And there's a bunch of different feelings I have about it. This year I really did like Christmas, and I've found that that album sort of makes me a bit hopeful, and I think it's kind of fun to listen to it after Christmas. So yeah, those are my two big things right now.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hello.
I was really interested in your conversation about earnestness and sincerity, and especially the comparison to BoJack Horseman. I think that in the broader culture and the internet culture especially, there's a very big push towards cynicism and irony and postmodernism. And I was wondering if you thought that there was greater demand or a particular like reaction culturally back towards sincerity that maybe you've seen being a force in it.
Totally. I think that's a question for both of us too, because I'd be really excited to hear what you think about that.
I mean, when we talked on the podcast this year about the things that we had really enjoyed a lot in 2017, a lot of them were things that were kind of warmer and a little bit more, not necessarily hopeful, but a little more kind of humane. You know, I think even when you talk about like how much people really like the Netflix One Day at a Time reboot, for example, which is just like a family comedy, and it's warm and it's kind of goofy and a little bit broad, but it's really good. I do think there's a little bit of, I mean, I think that's been happening. I think culture's a little bit naturally cyclical. So I think that's kind of been happening, but yeah, I do kind of feel like in the last, perhaps year and a half-ish.
Yeah.
I think
since November 2016.
There's been, I like to say the late fall, 2016. I do think there's been a little bit of people kind of wanting to make sure that they're still touching the parts of their brains that like things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think like something that I've been really interested in is sort of like the wholesome meme kind of movement, and I think that really has come out of like seeing the internet as this very cynical, sort of toxic place, and trying to inject a little bit of humanity and a little bit of hope to it. Often in ways that address like mental health and address sort of like the things that we're going through, but also even by addressing it, I think directly, it sort of creates this feeling that we're all in it together.
Yeah.
And I think that's been very helpful lately, and it's been something that I've been really into. Yeah. I even think like when we talk about darker feelings, and if you look at sort of darker comedy, there is a vein of sort of like genuineness and authenticness, and that like I think BoJack's a great example. I think Atlanta is a great example of that.
For sure.
And yeah, so I think authenticity maybe more than optimism, maybe. Yeah.
I mean, something that feels human, I think, is the, like it doesn't float above feelings.
Yeah.
And comment on feelings. It actually has feelings.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Thanks.
Hi. I saw on Twitter that a lot of people have been drawing or coloring your books. I've been too nervous to do that myself, but
it's all good.
Was that something you anticipated when you were putting the book together, or was that something that surprised you?
I think it was something that I was sort of hoping for, like in a way that, like my editor and I were sort of like, wouldn't it be cool if people did this? And even like, I think in the way I started drawing these, my editor was like, are you okay if people do this? Because it sort of has the style that invites people to, and I love it. Like, I think it's so great, and I'm someone who believes that like once it's in the world, it's yours. It's the person. It's like the book belongs to the person who bought it or who owns it, and it's no longer mine. Like it was mine when I made it, and now like it has to be yours. So it's so that's been really cool, and I love seeing how people have interpreted it, and I love like sharing that, and I love kind of like just being able to be part of someone's sort of creative path for one moment. And I think like the reason why I'm so adamant, and I'm sorry if I get spammy about like sharing it on Twitter and stuff, but I'm so adamant about that because I know like as an artist growing up, my first things that I made were like I drew Sonic the Hedgehog. Like I drew other people's work and I sort of remixed it and colored in books I wasn't supposed to, and drew Sonic the Hedgehog in sort of ways like that helped me learn how to draw. And anytime I was sort of supported on that, it made me feel like, oh, I should keep doing this. So I'm trying like to play a small role in convincing and like supporting everyone else and playing like this small positive role in their creative sort of path. So yeah. Hello.
Hi, thanks again for coming. So your presence online is not only kind of very wholesome and nice, but you've also been this great champion for self-care, which has become very buzzy, especially I'm a millennial woman, so a lot of people are trying to push skincare and bath bombs. But your brand of self-care is, you have your tiny care bot. In your stories, you've been cooking wholesome meals and taking just pictures of nice leaves that you see. So kind of how would you describe your approach to self-care, and how do you think folks should be approaching self-care other than just another trend that's being marketed?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Let me think about that. I think like a big thing that I believe in terms of self-care is, and I think the reason why I put this stuff out there is sort of to say, like, it's okay to like things, and it's okay to sort of be goofy and fun and to enjoy things, and it's also okay to realize you need to like take a step back and take a break and connect with yourself and connect with others. I do feel like there is this trend now where people are taking self-care and using it as a thing to sell products and to sort of tap into what's like the trend that's going on. And I think that's really unfortunate, but I don't think that's avoidable. But I think finding genuine ways, I think I'm just trying to share things that have helped me feel a bit better and make my day a little bit nicer. And cooking is one of those things where I kind of have more recently discovered it, and it's kind of been a thing that lets me take a step back and take a break and feel productive in half an hour, and it's sort of like a grounding meditative thing, and my partner and I do it together, and so it's a great way for us to connect too. And so I think I'm just trying to share ways that have helped me feel better and try to put it out there, and like liking leaves and just stopping to like make a nice picture of something, I think is also a nice way just to stop and kind of be aware of your surroundings and sort of connect with something outside of yourself. So yeah. Do you have any thoughts on that as a trend?
No, I mean, I think you're right that it doesn't need to be anything with any particular product. I think for some people, their skincare at the end of the day is their moment that they pause and don't think about anything except themselves, and I think that can be valuable. But to be that, it doesn't have to be any particular thing, and it definitely does not have to cost a lot of money. So there's no reason to, it just has to be something that's good for you. That's why the word self is in it, Yeah. Otherwise, it's just care.
Yeah. That's very deep. Oh, yeah, over here.
Well, I really liked your book.
Thank you.
And my question, so why did you choose to make the aliens misspell their words?
I meant to ask that and I forgot, so thank you.
That is an excellent question. I think in terms of the book, I've sort of felt like it's sort of a way to like accept difference and accept outsiders and accept like the book I think challenges people to say, oh, this title is misspelled, so I'm either going to put this down right away or maybe see what it's about. And I think even that sort of moment where someone accepts the book as a misspelled thing sort of speaks to like the idea of the book as a whole. So that's one element, and the other element sort of came from Twitter and came from writing and thinking about like Twitter is mainly a text-based space where like it's mainly words. You don't really perform on Twitter, you write on Twitter, and people don't hear you on Twitter, they read you. And so I was thinking a lot about reading and a lot about how you could change the way the words look in order to hear a different voice. And I think that sort of goes with the book as well, and it creates a rhythm and sort of a very specific type of cuteness and a type of voice that I thought helped with the book. So yeah, thank you.
And you already answered my other question of...
Oh, no, you go ahead. We'll talk in line. Thank you.
Hi. First, I just want to say thank you for writing this book. My friend who's behind me was the one who introduced me to the book, and I really, really love it. I just have kind of a silly question. So in the book, Johnny's about like twice as tall as a hedgehog. Does that mean he's about this tall?
Oh yeah. I don't know, and there are no humans to sort of scale it. Yeah. So maybe the hedgehog's really big. I haven't actually thought about it too much. I did have to draw Jomny like sitting on my shoulder for something once, and I drew Jomny like this tall, which I think is too small. So I guess he's like about this tall, I'd say.
It's also like the size of the egg.
That's true, yeah. Ooh.
I mean, it could be like a very large egg or a very large animal.
Mm-hmm.
But he's, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no. Size is all messed up.
We need a true crime podcast investigating how big is Jomny the alien.
The other thing that complicates that question is at the end of the book, I've included like these types of drawings that are sort of like the idea for these drawings is sort of these are what the animals on Earth actually look like, and these are sort of how Jomny draws them in his like reports back to the aliens. And so the rest of the book is sort of how Jomny sees everyone. And so that just makes things more complicated. I don't have an answer for that really, but yeah. So thank you. That's a great question.
My question is, how did you come up with the character Jomny? Is he based off of yourself or is he based off of other people? How did you create him?
Yeah, I think it's a long sort of journey. I think originally it started as me just needing like an image to put on my Twitter account, and the alien sort of just came. The idea of it being an alien just came sort of naturally. I didn't like sit and like think about what it should be. I had just moved to the U.S. I'm from Canada, and I had like sort of been thinking a lot about how it made me feel like an outsider and how I literally was a legal alien. And so I've been thinking. I think I thought a lot about that, and the alien is sort of like this metaphor for being an outsider. And so that's served me really well in terms of creating a voice and a perspective and sort of finding out what I want to talk about. And I think that sort of carried through. And so when the idea to do a book came along, I wanted to explore that more and make that a lot more sort of pointed and carry that metaphor through. So yeah, that's where it started. I also have loved like science fiction and sort of like the ideas of alien stories, but I've never like felt like the stories ever focus on the alien, and so I just wanted to sort of create something where the alien was the main character. So yeah, do you want to talk about like aliens and sci-fi or anything?
I like aliens, but you know more than me.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Oh, I'll add one more thing, which is that like the idea of the book too was about writing a story where the protagonist isn't the main character, or writing a story centered around sort of like the side character. And I've sort of like felt this way where I never feel like I'm the main character to my own story. I feel like I'm the supporting role to everyone else's story. And I sort of place that in context with the alien too, because the alien is usually like, in E.T., he's not the main character. Elliot's the main character, and E.T. is just like the thing that moves the plot forward in a way, or the best friend or the sidekick. And so I wanted to sort of flip that and see what that kind of story would look like. So yeah, thanks.
Hi, what was your favorite story arc, like character interaction to write?
Oh, that's a good question. The one that I really liked, that I think was like sort of the most surprising to me was the bear and Mel, the sort of Yeti character. Your name's Mel? Oh my gosh! Hi Mel, that's for you then. Because I like in this sort of metaphor of like thinking about the book as like a social media timeline and thinking about all these different characters. I realized that like I had sort of kept all these characters separate at the beginning, and the second half of the book is really about bringing all these characters together and interacting in different unique ways. And so I think my favorite storyline was creating like this secret love story in the middle of everything, and only getting to see like tiny peeks at it and not really figuring out, like not seeing the entire story, but just getting enough to understand like what's going on, and figuring out what aspects and what elements to show and how to sort of unfold that story was really fun for me. So
Thank you.
Thanks. Hey.
So I really liked this book.
Thank you.
And the character, Jomny, is hilarious.
Thank you.
So I was wondering if he would be in like a sequel or something.
Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Yay.
Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. I'd love to write him into a sequel. I'd love to figure out where to go with him. And at this point, I'm still sort of I don't really know where what the next story will be. So I'm at that moment where I'm trying to figure it out. So I'm glad that you're looking forward to another one. So
Just put your I Wish song right in there and your musical will
you're
start.
right. Yeah, it's true.
Speaking of musicals, that's a perfect segue from my
great.
question, which was, did you ever consider putting any music to this as background? And in that case, what might it be?
Yeah, that's a great question. The closest thing I can think of is I'll name like some of the albums that I listened to while I was working on the book. And I think like my relationship to music and watching things, writing is really hard for me to have stuff in the background, but most of the time spent on this book was drawing. And drawing is intensely lonely and intensely quiet when you have nothing else around. And so I got really into sort of playing things in the background and having music on. One of the big like tonal ones for me was Frank Ocean's new album, which is called Blonde, which is sort of, it's like, I think it's about sort of, it's a very sad sort of like album that melts things together. I also listen to Hamilton a lot, just because I mean I love Hamilton, but also the idea of like all these different characters popping up and weaving themselves into other stories and like sort of dissecting that musical in terms of like that sort of narrative again. And I also listen to Last 5 Years a lot, which is another musical. And I know you love Last 5 Years. And if anyone hasn't heard of it, it's a two-person musical, and it's.
We will now do the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. Here we go. And it's about a relationship that falls apart, and from the guy's side of the relationship, the musical works forward in time, and from the girl's side of the musical, it works backwards in time. So the Kathy starts at the end, right? At the breakup. And as the musical progresses, she gets to the point where she meets the guy.
Thank goodness.
And so it's this wonderful, like crazy narrative kind of thing that is not supposed to work at all, but it works amazingly. And yeah.
And it's very structurally, it makes sense to me because it's very structurally experimental, kind of like this, to me, sort of like the book is in some way.
Yeah.
Just a comment. The analogy from this book, which I never saw before tonight, I have to admit, but it's very charming.
Oh, thank
I
you.
think about it related to Shel Silverstein, which you talked about before. And I think the magic of it is that depending on whatever age you are and wherever you are in life, there's something to relate, some character that you can relate to. And I think that's very special.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's remarkable to me how sweet and almost innocent the themes and motifs in your book are, especially paired with the illustrations, and not only in your book, but in your tweets and what you've been saying tonight. How much of that sort of sincerity and sweetness was born out of your own life experience that may have been darker or tougher, like struggles with mental illness or your family or culture, things like that?
I think a lot of it, I think it's sort of built into me in a lot of ways. I think like part of my goal for this book, and sort of like part of how I place this book with like the rest of my work, is to give seriousness to cuteness, and to say like, if this is like a hopeful, cute thing, that doesn't make the value of it any less. It's not less important than my PhD work, even though my parents always think that. And it's sort of, it's not any lesser. And so like, I think this is sort of a celebration of that sort of cuteness. And I think I've always been really invested in work that looks like this and sort of feels like this. And it's helped me a lot to, I guess, to deal with like my own mental health, both in making this and trying to, sometimes like drawing a happy face really does make me feel better if I get it right. Other times I'm just like, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. But once you get there, it's kind of nice. So a lot of it has been like therapeutic, and we're working through that as well. So
Also, what's it like being friends with Lin-Manuel Miranda?
It's wild. It's the best thing ever, and I always doubt that it's real. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I had a comment and a question, or I guess a story.
Totally.
One was that my girlfriend and I actually bought your book for one another for Christmas
Oh,
without knowing.
yay. Oh, that's so sweet.
Which is a funny thing.
Oh my gosh.
And the second part is the question of, One of the most beautiful and like achingly resonant lines I've ever read in my entire life was in the daily log of sometimes I have it written down.
Yeah. And for those who don't know, that's like in these end pages of the book. Right. So yes.
Sometimes leaving feels a lot like being left behind. Were you thinking of any experience or time in particular when you came up with that? Or
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, this whole book is sort of a metaphor for my time in any sort of school, and I wrote this directly after I finished my architecture school program, my master's, and I moved to Boston. I started my PhD program, and I found I was missing all these people. At the same time, I was away from home anyway, and I was traveling back to Toronto and then coming back here. And I remember writing that as a tweet, actually, on like the day I was sitting in the airport, just leaving Toronto, which is where all my friends and family are, and where my partner was until she moved with me to Boston. But I was leaving everything and then going back to Boston. And I just remember feeling like every time I go home, I catch up with friends. They're all doing stuff. They're living their lives. They're hanging out together. My family's there. And every time I remove myself from it, it felt more like getting left behind. And so I kind of worked that into the whole book. The whole book is sort of about that experience. So yeah, I think it's one of the most resonant kind of things that resonates with me about everything. So thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay. It's like weird that you just talked about school because I just started school and I kind of feel like the same way.
Yeah.
But like growing up, going through like grade school,
yeah,
I was kind of always taught that there's like creative, like left brain people and like the right brain people who are like do science stuff.
Yeah.
And you're like one of the first people I've seen who like been successful in both areas. So I never knew anybody can like kind of like do both at the same time. So
yeah.
Was there any like struggle going between like science and art, and like how did you like push it together in your life?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, this is the best question. Thank you. I feel so great because like part of the reason why I think I'm pushing so hard to do all this stuff is because I think that left brain, right brain, choose one over the other thing is sort of like BS. And like I don't think that, I think that's a myth. And I like part of me has wanted to be very vocal about being a PhD student and being an engineering student, and also being a creative, and this idea of people who can operate in both worlds. And I think for me, I found that my creative work has fed into my research, and a lot of my research and a lot of sort of like my technical background has fed into like my creative work. And like engineering taught me all about structure and thinking about things in terms of a logic and an organization, and that I bring that a lot into all my creative work. Like this whole book, even though it's very cute and silly and should be taken seriously because of that, is also very structurally sort of fun. So I think those two things should not exist separately, and I think more and more, I think there are people who are sort of bringing those two together. Two sort of like people that I love on Twitter and that I've had conversations about this with are two poets, Clint Smith and Eve Ewing, who are both sociologists and both poets, and sort of both looking at like this very research-driven academia work and also this creative sort of practice. And I want to see more people who do that. And speaking of which, like Linda, you used to be a lawyer, right?
Yes.
And do you want to talk about that?
Well, it's less different probably than architecture. I mean, but on the other hand, architecture and drawing are related also. I mean, it's less different in the sense that like I learned how to argue loudly when I was a lawyer, and I still argue loudly on the internet. But it is true. I have a theory that many people in their lives go through like 6 to 8 year chapters, and I think for a lot of people, if they establish early on family and stuff like that put demands on where they live and they don't move around as much, it may be more difficult to identify where those chapters fall because they're more internalized. But I think if you talk to a lot of people in certain segments of their lives, you'll find that like 6 years after this happened, they took on a major new responsibility. And 7 years after that happened, they moved to a new place, not just a lifestyle difference, but like a chapter of who you feel like you are and what your identity is. And so to me, when you talk to people and you start to tease those things out, very often people are good at more than one thing. And very often, even if they've been in one field their whole lives, they do more teaching. And then at another time, they do more research. And at another time, they do more presenting, or they do, they go to work for a nonprofit or something like that. So I think most people are good at a whole bunch of things. And I think the more people you meet, the more you will find that you doing one thing, you can drop, quit, as long as you can pay your rent and take care of yourself. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's perfectly possible that you have 2 entirely good paths, or 3 or 6, and you'll get to try some of them and other ones you won't.
Yeah, and I will say, as like just to encourage you, is like when I was in engineering school, I was in theater and I was in sketch comedy and I was writing plays, and that stuff never really, like, that was just all extracurricular to me, because at the moment I felt like school was supposed to be this thing, but this was this other thing that I loved doing, and that sort of hadn't like become part of my thing, like part of who I was, until much later. But I think the idea of continuing to like have that practice and to be able to follow those paths and to develop those avenues is really important.
Yeah. When people have asked me about career changing, I've often said, like, I do not encourage anyone to spend college trying to figure out what they're going to want to be doing when they're 60. Because some people do, right? Everybody knows those people, right? And that's awesome for them. But there are other people who will really waste college because they're not follow the things that you're excited about that you do anyway. Like, I was doing law, but I was, also I wrote press releases for my fantasy baseball team at my office because that's what I wanted to be doing. So, like, chase the thing.
Yeah, and find as many ways as you can do it, and keep following it. So, yeah.
Can you repeat the 2 poets that you just said?
Oh yeah, Clint Smith and Eve Ewing. Yeah, of course. Yeah, both very easy to find. I think that's it, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
I think so. So you're going to sign some books. And where's that happening?
It's going to be happening right back.
It's happening right back here.
Perfect.
You will be here. I will not.
Great. Yay, thanks everyone. Thank you,
Thanks,
Linda.
everybody.